Go.
Start.
الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده حمد الشاكرين ونصلي ونسلم على نبينا أمين محمد رحمة العالمين. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه والتابعين بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد, we start in the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. And we bear witness there is no deity worthy worship except Allah. Praise and glory be to Him. And that Muhammad is the seal of messengers. He was sent as a mercy to all mankind. May peace and blessing of Allah be upon him, his family, his companion, and those who followed his path until the day of judgment. I greet you with the greeting of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. Dear brothers, dear sisters, dear viewers, this is Dr. Abdul Aziz with you on this Arab Spring Show. And we are very honored as well to have Brother Abu Bashir, our guest today, on this third part of this series of talks about the Arab Spring. And we're moving from one state to another. We covered almost Tunisia and Syria, Iraq. And today, inshallah, we hope to cover Egypt as well. And of course, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Abu Bashir. How are you, inshallah?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Fine, alhamdulillah.
Jazakumullahu khair. I think Egypt did actually start early in 2011 as well by an event as well, similar to the one of the Tunisian as well. On the 17th of January, 2011, a man set fire to himself next to the parliament building in Cairo in protest of the economic conditions. Okay, inshallah, give us some background about the whole thing, inshallah. And of course, we will just develop the discussion as we go along with this program, inshallah.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulihi wa ala sahbihi wa alihi ajma'in. Egypt, like Tunisia, like Syria, like almost, well, not almost, definitely all the Arab world, have lived in a state of corruption, which is probably worse than even what happened in Syria or in Tunisia. In 1952, up to 1952, and for hundreds of years before that, it was a monarchist country.
Mm-hmm.
And then the army led what they call a revolution. It wasn't a revolution, it was a coup, military coup, but they called it revolution because, to be honest, it became popular after that, led by Jamal Abdel Nasser, and they ruled the country for the next 60 years. From 1952 till 2011, actually 2012, exactly 60 years. During those years, the monarchists were replaced by another type of monarchist, and that is the military monarchist. The Arab world is led by monarchists. They are all monarchists. Even they call them republics, but the rulers are kings. What I mean by king, although they might call themselves prime ministers or emir or president, but they are all kings. The kings in the third world are the ones who rule as long as he is alive. So does the prime minister or the president in an Arab country. And then he passes it on to his offspring, just like a king. And then he is above the law, just like a king. And the country's resources are his. It's his own. The whole country is like his own farm. So they were all really kings. Although, as I said, not all of them call themselves kings. Anyway, so the army, that king, King Nasser, although he was president, again, his army officers became the landlords of the country. They had all the privileges and people had no privileges. Corruption, of course, followed, that only those who are pro the system get all the opportunities, and there's no justice in the law as well. I mean, I'm just repeating what we did about Tunisia and Syria, exactly the same thing. Anyway, after Nasser did, and then plus his disastrous 1967 war, where he promised to throw the Israelis in the sea within 24 hours or 48 hours. But then his army was defeated in 6 days. In 73, they fared better, really, the Egyptians. They put up a good fight, I give them that. But again, because of the leader who at that time was Sadat, Nasser died in 1970, Sadat came after. Sadat intervened in the running of the war, and he ruined it. He ruined an imminent win, and he made it an imminent defeat. And then he made a very unpopular peace treaty with Israel. I'm saying unpopular because Israelis cannot walk freely in Cairo and the Egyptians don't visit Israel, as simple as this. So it was a peace treaty between the governments. And actually all peace treaties between Israel and the Arab countries are peace treaties between the governments. It's never between the people. As I said, an American, British, Australian visits Egypt, visit Jordan and Algeria, any Arab country, he feels he is welcome. Israelis, when they come to our countries, they need a big police force to protect them. And so they don't come there anyway. Coming back to Egypt, Sadat was assassinated by his army, replaced by Mubarak in 1980, I think it was 79, 80, yeah. And he stayed there for 30 years. 30 years of utter corruption. Him, his wife, his children, his cronies really were much more corrupt than Sadat or Nasser. And the country became poorer and poorer because of corruption. Instead of developing the country, things were going to their private pockets, to their accounts in international banks. There are reports that when Mubarak was ousted in 2011, uprising, will come to that, Arab Spring, that him and his family had anything between 70 to $200 billion. We don't know how much they've stolen. And it's not only them, hundreds of army officers as well, and ministers. And who's paying for this? Mostly debts. I mean, Egypt now owes the international banks something like over $100 billion. The Egyptian pound has gone down a lot. But anyway, coming back to this Mubarak, people had enough. People saw what happened with the Tunisian revolution. And again, one incident was enough to light the fire of the Arab Spring there. As you mentioned, somebody killed himself there in Egypt. So a demonstration came, voluntary, spontaneous demonstrations came throughout Egypt, and people now realize that if we stand up to the police will give in, and they did. For about 4 days, the police really tried hard. And they tried hard to stop the demonstration. They were firing at them. They killed 900 plus people, between 900 and 1,000. They injured thousands of people. And they had as well what they call the thugs, the forces of the thugs. What are the thugs? Now, the thugs are used heavily in Arab countries nowadays. The thugs are two types of thugs. Either police force, but in plain clothes, civilian clothes, right? That's one. Or they are real thugs that the police employ them, right? Those people, they just go and do the work of the police. They are armed. Look, you can see them in civilian clothes.
Let me just
and
can you just go? Can you back? Go back here.
Yeah. Okay, a second.
Go back.
Yeah. Can you see it now?
Okay, I can see it. Yes.
Yeah. So these people are plainclothes people, and with their guns, and they fire in front of the army at the civilians. or they're thugs that the police know them and they pay them and they go and hit the people and defile the people, so the police can say it's not us. They use heavily in Syria as well. They have different names. They call them Shabiha. In Egypt, they call them Baltajiyya. But they do the same job. And those people, as I said, not only them, but still, there was a lot of resolve from the people, and they kept on demonstrating in millions. And it was actually a demonstrations or uprising that drew the whole world's respect. It was orderly. There was no public thefts. There was no attack on civilians, on civilian properties. Journalists from out the world went and joined them. And it was a very, very civilized really revolution. For 17 days, people, there was, the police then fled. And when the police fled, still, there was more peace in Egypt, more security than when the police were active. The police disappeared suddenly because, you know, the police by the time, by the way, in Egypt was a special police here in Egypt. The police themselves were so corrupt that they used to interrogate people in the police station, and people used to die from the interrogation, and they used to bury them in the police stations, or people disappear. When people go to police stations, they disappear, and their family don't know anything about them. The state will never see them. The police as well, there are many videos, you could see them on YouTube, where the police are dealing with the drugs. So if they catch a drug, they take it to a police station and they share it. And the police officers themselves are are drug dealers. So that's how bad it was. Then Mubarak looked for the army, the same like Ben Ali looked for the army to help him out. The army didn't. Although the Egyptian army became very corrupt, actually. Why the army didn't? As I said, that uprising drew the whole world's respect, including the lower army ranks, not the higher one. The lower army ranks, I mean, the army sent their tanks to Cairo and to other cities, but the army loved the people. So the people were mingling with the army and taking photos with them and climbing on their tanks. So the army felt if they give order to shoot, who's going to shoot? Not the colonels and the generals. The ones who's going to shoot are the ordinary soldiers, and they're not going to shoot because they are just felt that they belong to those people. So the army played it, played it cool and neutral, and they would not. They said the same thing as they said to Ben Ali: "It's your problem, you solve it." Then Mubarak resigned. Mubarak was there for 30 years, and the election was due for another presidential election that lasts for 6 years. And because he became very old in his late 80s, he prepared his son, Jamal, as I said, like a monarchist, Jamal, to take over. So that didn't happen. So the army took over, and they have allowed a fair election. I must admit, it was a fair election. 2013 took 2 years after, but during those two years, there was some stability in Egypt. So the army took over, and they arranged an election. And to everybody's surprise, a man called Muhammad Morsi, who was not known outside Egypt, won the election by a small majority of 52%. But and he belonged to the Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamic revival organization that was established in 1928 by a man called Hassan al-Banna. He was killed by the authorities, by the way, 20 years after. And that organization really is to bring some dignity back to the people and to give them some independence. Because Egypt was occupied by the British, before by the French, and it's never really had stability there. And that's why you see this became one of the worst, probably third world countries. So this Morsi came, an unknown man to the world, and he came up with big projects. He came to fight corruption. The man was honest, was sincere. He was Hafiz of Quran, a memorizer of the Quran, very pious man. Then for reason that people did not see, couldn't understand why, there was very little progress in his time. There was no theft by the officials. There was almost zero theft. There was zero corruption. But at the same time, the country was not doing well. What happened that we knew after, long after, that the army and the system, the old system of Mubarak and before him Sadat, etc., the old system worked together, collaborated together to make the life of Morsi and his administration impossible, right? So there were demonstrations all the time by the workforces in different factories, etc., by the teachers. There were shortage of fuel all the time. There was non-stop complaint in the press and in the media about Morsi, although he wasn't doing anything wrong. The complaints kept escalating, and Morsi was so peaceful. He could see that people out there are to wreck his government and to wreck his effort, and he was very kind to them. Too kind, to be honest. That's one of his mistakes. He was so kind that he employed Sisi, a man, again, unknown man, one of the top army officers, employed him as the defense minister. And this Sisi pretended to be pious, pretended to be a good man. He played a number on Morsi. One day Morsi invited him for tea or something in the palace. He said, no, Jazakallah khairan, I'm fasting. Right? He said he was fasting. It wasn't Ramadan. So Sisi is ruling Egypt now. I must mention a joke here that happened last year, that the Pope of Egypt, they've got the Christian Egyptian, they've got a Pope there.
The Copts.
The Coptic, they have a Pope. They've invited Sisi. He said that, and he's very close to Sisi. He invited Sisi for iftar. As a Christian inviting a Muslim, so-called Muslim, for iftar in Ramadan. It's normal for people to officials to invite each other for iftar just for public propaganda.
Relations.
Yeah, so he invited Sisi for iftar in Ramadan. You know what Sisi answered him? Ana mush saim. I'm not fasting. So in Ramadan he did not fast, but during Sisi time on a Monday he was fasting. Anyway, this man slowly plotted to get rid of Morsi, and by the time Morsi completed exactly 1 year, there was a military coup. They took over. The military took over and put Morsi in prison, and he stayed there for the next 6 years, 7 years. They made sure with no fair trial, no medical care. He was in his 60s. He had diabetes. He had other problems. They deprived him of his doctor, of treatment. So the man slowly collapsed and he died, which was really an assassination, indirect assassination. And then the Sisi ruled, right? And the army ruled. And then the army now wanted to revenge. How dare the civilians liberate themselves from our grip? And the army became so savage, really. It was the first, I mean, they've had big problem with the police force. The army before Sisi, only the very top one were the corrupt one and the thieves. But I mean, by the thieves, they take big corruption, right? Big chunks of whatever budget they have to themselves, and the rest they spend it either on the army, or the army, Egyptian army officers don't retire. When they finish from the army, they are placed by the government to be heads of civilian companies or government positions. So either become governors of somewhere in some big cities, or become the governor of the bank, or the central bank. They always are kept, they look after themselves. So the top jobs in Egypt to the army officer, to the retired army officers. And they make sure during that time that they milk their country dry. They don't stop, those army officers. So the corruption now is by two sides, the army and the police. For some reason that we don't understand, the army had a mission, or Sisi had a mission, to demolish Sinai. We don't know why. He went to Sinai, and Sinai has always been a quiet place, never caused the Egyptian authorities any problem. They just decided to demolish, I'm talking about literally demolishing the cities and towns in Sinai in the name of fighting terrorism. Instead in the name of fighting terrorism, they started demolishing the whole cities there. And the reason, they did not have planning permission. I mean, in a civilized country, if you punish people like this, you find them similar alternative accommodation first. No, the army will go with their tanks, give the people order, you have to leave within 24 hours or we'll demolish the houses over your heads. The army as well, I mean, the Egyptian army has become really not a national army, become a colonialist army. See the difference between a national army and a colonialist army, that the nationalist army defend the leader, although he's wrong, they do that. But the colonialist army does four things that nationalists should not do. They do four things. First thing is they kill innocent people. And the Egyptian army killed hundreds of innocent people in Sinai, in Cairo, anywhere. Every now and then they kill so many and they accuse them. We said we've killed terrorists. They rape women. Nationalist army does not rape women. They demolish the country, kill, rape women, kill innocent people, and steal the resources of the country. As if you look at the Egyptian army now, as if they have nothing to do with Egypt. They're worse than what the French did to the Algerians, or probably the same, because that was very bad as well. Or the Israelis doing to the Palestinians. So this is the problem now that they have the face now. They had the corrupt police, now they've got the corrupt police and the corrupt army. This Sisi as well had other plans for the army, not only corruption. Somehow he wanted the army to lose its dignity and its professionalism. Although that was been going on for 60 years before him. But if the army had good leader, as happened between 1967 and 73, Egypt has got a lot of potential. Suddenly, within 6-7 years, Egypt became almost compatible or as good as militarily as Israel. I mean, in 73, the Egyptian army was classified as the best army in the world at that time. So Egypt has got a lot of potential. We can see as it wasn't the Israeli interest to demoralize and destroy the fabrics of the Egyptian army. I mean, I'm going to show you something which is really shocking here. What does the Egyptian army looks like now? Something which is, okay, let's look at this thing here, which is, you won't believe it really, that these things exist in any country in the world. Do you see these pictures?
Yes.
Egyptian army selling on the street vegetables. That's in Sisi's time. Why? Why is they selling vegetables? Just to humiliate them. And then what they say, look what they're sitting on the street. In the seat, on a chair or on a box, he's sitting and selling. Is this not very humiliating? Is this an army that will fight to defend its country? How does this army officer or soldier feel when he goes back home? What he's going to say to his family? I've been training today, or I've sold 2 or 3 kilos of cucumber all my day. So you see, demoralizing the Egyptian army. It seems that suits the Israelis best. There are rumors but very strong rumors that even Sisi did not deny them, that Sisi himself is a Jew. When Sisi went to America about 3 years ago, a journalist interviewed him, and he didn't expect this. He said to him, while you are in America, you met such and such Israeli general. No problem with this, because Israel and Egypt have got diplomatic recognition and relationship. There's no problem, right? He said, yes, I know him very well. He said, people say that he's your cousin, and Sisi didn't answer it. He didn't say, no, I don't know, I'm an Arab and he's a Jew. I'm from Egypt, he's from Israel, or from probably Poland. He didn't answer it. People say as well that his mother, anyway, this man is there to demolish the country and the economy as well as the army. This is some of the pictures. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Can you see this or
Yes, I can see it, yeah.
Yeah, I can see, okay. Quickly, this is what Egypt now, look at that, Where is this? I mean, is this a country that was rich in resources? Arab countries spent billions of dollars supporting them. Look what happened. This is where the poor Egyptians live now, look, right? They've left nothing for the people. This is during the demonstrations. This is game over. Irhal means leave the country. Mubarak spent some time in prison during Sisi time, during Morsi time. When Sisi came and became president, he released him. There were charges of corruption. The $70 billion disappeared, and he died now. But his children are enjoying what's his left. This is during the demonstrations. This is what they call the Baltaji, the thugs that work for the police. This is Muhammad Morsi, rahimahullah, the one who's, right, they put him in prison, no fair trial. You know what the charges against him were?
Yeah.
He was negotiating with Qatar, muhadathat ma Qatar, as if Qatar was, Qatar is one of the Arab countries. He said, this is one of the accusations, that he had secret negotiation with Qatar. What happened? I mean, did he sell the country to Qatar? They sold it to Shaitan. But anyway, this is now Sisi has got one of his projects is to demolish, as I said, cities. This is in Cairo, not in Sinai. We'll come to Sinai. Suddenly they remembered, the Egyptian authority during Sisi time, that a lot of these buildings have been built without government planning, which is planning permission. Yeah. Planning permission. That is not true, because without planning permission, you could build something, but you cannot bring electricity, you cannot bring water, you cannot make roads, isn't it, right?
Yeah.
You can't. You can build a house, you can build a room, but you cannot build big building without planning permission. But they say these were forged. But this is a way, again, to demoralize the people and make life hell for them. Or you have to pay the government, actually, or way to make money from the people. How? They say, if you want to keep your house, you get to pay hundreds of thousands of Egyptian pounds, which people don't have it anyway, right? Now, another big problem that the Sisi is doing to demolish the whole of Egypt, and that is the Nile. About 20 years ago, the Ethiopians decided to build a dam on the Nile. The Nile starts from Ethiopia and goes through Sudan and then Egypt. There was an agreement between all those countries that the Nile passes by of distributing the amount of water each country can use. But building a very big dam in Ethiopia will limit the amount of water that comes to Sudan and Egypt. In 2016, when ECC was president, he was there for 2 years now. When he became president, he had a meeting with the Ethiopian authorities regarding the Nile, and he agreed to the newly allocated amount of water that Egypt could have, which about a quarter of what they used to have. He signed it. And he just said to the prime minister, who his name is Ahmed, but he was not a Muslim and he's not an Arab. That's on TV. This Ahmed, the Ethiopian prime minister. He said to him in Arabic, say, Uqsim billah al-azim, that I swear by Allah the Great, that I will give Egypt enough water. The man said it in Arabic, he didn't understand it. He didn't speak Arabic. But this is not the way that people deal with. You make him write. You write agreements. But he signed an agreement, signed off Egypt's share. And this is what now the Nile is drying off. The Egyptians are using drainage water and sewage water to grow their fruits and vegetables. Most Arab countries, never mind the third Europe, stopped importing any fruits or any vegetables from Egypt. And the people there are getting disease after disease after disease. This is President Sisi, who wanted to show that he's a civilized man. He is talking to an Egyptian child. Egyptian, not American. Look at him, he's very Egyptian. He's speaking him in eloquent English. I want shake hand you. Nobody, I mean, he could speak to him, I want, as a safhak. He meant, I want to shake your hand. I want to shake, that's the standard. Right? This is Sinai. We saw what he did in Cairo. This is what he's doing in Sinai. Total demolition of Sinai. Why? That's to help Israel. Because Sinai, if it is populated, it's a very big threat to Israel, just like under Gaza. So he's doing their agenda, demoralizing, destroying the country, the Egyptian army, as well as all the border towns between Israel and Egypt. Israel is building this wall. And the wall before, I showed you, sorry, Israel is building this wall between them and Gaza. Egypt is building similar wall between them and Gaza. Why? The Egyptians, Gazans don't want to invade Egypt. What they want to invade a desert like Sinai for? What for? In the history, there has never been a problem between Egypt and Palestine. Never. Egypt had a problem with Syria, with Libya, with Sudan. Borders problem. Never had a problem with the Palestinians. Why are they building a wall like this? This is the Egyptian army now, the new Egyptian army. And this is our end of show. So we'll stop the share now. And we'll go back to, right. What is, yes, I'll leave you to comment. I've been talking for half an hour.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for that. It was very quick, mashallah, but you briefed, I think you gave us a summary. You gave actually the whole picture, what is going on as well. You know, when you spoke about Egypt, I mean, Egypt, of course, there is what we call this things what happen inside, changes can happen. And of course, the people rose and there was a civil society uprising about economic conditions and all kind of things, talking for having a civilian government in charge of them, not a military. And of course, the military have their main task is to defend the country and any constitution. The military do not have to deal with the political life and everything. They are trained to deal with any external threats from the outside as well. And they are there to protect the citizen of that country as well. That's what we see. However, when we speak about if Egypt within, therefore they have changes as well. But of course, the outside world is not actually, as you said, you mentioned Israel, you mentioned you know this, but you have United States there because in Trump time he described the Sisi as my little favorite dictator. And now even when changes happens, Obama was there and he spoke on the 10th of January, for example, 2011, that there should be a path to a roadmap to democracy. And of course, the Hosni Mubarak listened and he did as well. So therefore, Egypt is not in vacuum, but I think United States give a lot of, I don't know, 1.5 to 1.8 billion aid. Saudi Arabia put money, a lot of people there put money who were actually, are they, those people supporting the people, or actually they are supporting the regimes who are actually in charge of the country?
Nobody from outside Egypt supporting the people. You don't give money to corrupt people, to thieves, right? All those who, the United States giving money to Egypt to make sure that they have a say there. They can influence the policies of the country. They can influence their military progress, their military power. When they give you so much money, first of all, they know a lot of this money will go to private pockets. The Americans know that, right? And when the Saudis and the Gulf people helped Sisi, not Morsi, when they helped them to establish himself after the revolution or after the coup, they gave him $60 billion. Where the $60 billion disappeared? It disappeared totally. If he spent $60 billion in the country, we wouldn't see what we saw before, the destructions and the poverty. So from outside, we don't blame the people outside for what happened in our countries, to be honest. I myself don't, a lot of other Arabs do. I don't blame either Israel, America, or the Arab governments. We blame our own military, people who are keeping those dictators. Our militaries are our enemies now. That is the reality. We got to face it. We have to stop blaming. I mean, America and the West, they wish they can change the government of North Korea. They wish, and they've got the means, they've got the same money, they can spend billions there, but they couldn't. They wish to change the government of Iran, which is another North Korea. I know it's the corrupt country, etc., but it's not pro-West. So they wish to change it. So I don't blame these people. When the Arab Spring started, to be honest, Obama and European leaders, they all praised it. Nobody could not praise it because there's freedom of speech here. There's freedom of press here. And people were all praising that what's happening there was a civilized way of demonstrating and protesting against injustice and indignity. So everybody praised it. And then doesn't mean they were happy about it. They wish that they kept their dictator, their favorite dictator, but they, at the end of the day, the Western power, including Israel, are realists. If a nationalist took over, they'll have to agree, they'll have to accept him and probably plot against him. But that Arab Spring, many people said it was a conspiracy by the West or by Israel. It is not. It's not. If it was conspiracy, it would have succeeded.
And you know, the counter-revolution, everything, when you look to human rights and everything, this is a report on the August 14, 2000, killing are now known as in Rabia massacre. The regime has also jailed tens of thousands of people, most of whom are from Muslim Brotherhood supporters, and suppressed any dissent using extreme measures. Human Rights Watch that a high number of protesters had suffered wounds in the head, neck, and upper body, raising the question of whether some police officers may have been shooting, that is the policy shooting to kill as well. And thousands of people have actually lost their lives, and thousands, almost between 65,000 to 100,000 people are in jail as well, in very, very difficult conditions, especially under COVID-19 and overcrowding as well. And some have actually, as you said, Mohammed Morsi, Issam al-Aryan, there was Dr. Issam al-Aryan, and some other very, very known personalities who have been jailed without trial and everything.
And they were killed, they died in the prisons, yes.
Yes, dying in prison as well. Now, when you look to, the uprising with the civil, I call it civil society uprising, and looking and demanding their rights and improving their economic situation, social economy, and getting justice as well. And you find that the role of the civil societies as well. But why there was no overcry by the outside world, you know, the NGOs, human rights and civil societies around the world when they saw what was taking place in Egypt, and is taking place now as well. Why this kind of double standard, you know?
Well, we know this double standard always exists in the West. It always existed. If uprising happened in a country which is hostile to the West, then they highlight it and they concentrate on it and they put a lot of light on it. But if the country is not pro-West, or the people are not pro-West, then shyly they mention one or two journalists here and there. If this what happened in China, it will be every day there. It happened in Myanmar, where they're killing Muslims by the thousands, and again, very little coverage of it, you see. But if a Palestinian threw a bomb in Tel Aviv, it will be front news for days. And so, I mean, the Western people, they have got their own agenda. They have a little bit, a very little bit of sympathy with third world countries. I don't blame them. You don't beg for respect or power. You have to earn it yourself. You have to force people to respect you. You have to force people. I mean, like Turkey has forced the West to respect them, right?
And Turkey avoided the military coup as well, isn't it?
Yes, okay, and the West all supported that, but still, I'm saying they force people to respect them. You got to defend yourselves. We don't want the West to cry with us. We have to carry ourselves, and we have to get rid of our dictators, whether those NGOs, whether human rights organizations support us or not. Okay, it's just a small bonus. I mean, there hasn't been any program on the BBC or any Western media about the crimes of the Israeli settlers in Palestine, for example. We'll have to talk about Palestine as a day, right? People mention one or two journalists, or not one, two, probably 20, 30 journalists in the Sisi prisons, but they don't mention the 60,000 you mentioned. Sisi didn't build a single hospital in the past 10 years. What he built, 11 prisons, right? So, I mean, as I said, those people, okay, they're doing a good job for their own, they've got their own agenda. They're not evil, I must tell you, those NGOs, this human rights, they're not evil, but the interest of their countries has got priorities, really, and it's showing from their coverage, right? They defend a few journalists, but not the 60,000 prisoners who are there without any trials for years. Again, 12,000 Palestinian prisoners in Palestine, in Israeli prisons, and they are hardly mentioned. Israel has demolished more than 50,000 Palestinian houses since the occupation in 1967, and nobody mentioned this. So anyway, I have little hope with those organizations. As I said, they're not our enemies, but we cannot make any use of them, really.
Right, and you know, you see the European Union, for example, I mean, 27 countries, the African organization as well, African Union as well, and in the African Union, for example, they, I think, postponed the membership of Egypt after the military coup, because they have in their constitution that anyone who come in a military coup, he will be suspended, his membership will be suspended. Now, those pressures are not actually, do you think that those pressures on the regime, and especially with the coming of the Biden administration, do you think that those pressure will make sure that the military will move out and leave a civilian government and the civil society to run its affairs and come back to democracy and do a free election for president and for the parliament and everything?
Yeah, let's talk about the Organization of African Countries. That organization, through in their constitution, if there's a military coup in a country, they won't recognize it. And in the past 50 years, what they meant, they don't recognize it for 1 year. And after 1 year, they forgive the leader and they accept him. This is what's happening. There has been many coups in Africa, and they just show that they were unhappy for 1 year, And after 1 year, back to now. Egypt is very active country of African Union of the Organization of African Countries. They're very active there. They're forgiven him. We can't rely on those people because a lot of them are dictators as well. So they got to protect each other. As for European, the European, again, because of the democracy in the West and because of the freedom of the press, they condemn atrocities, they condemn military coups for a short while. Again, in Africa for a year, here for a few months. Same thing. Here, everybody was against Sisi when he came, and the European leaders, European Parliament, the press, everybody against him. You have overtaken democratically elected government. You call for democracy. So for a few months, everybody was against him, and then back to normal. They really they prefer Sisi to Morsi, because the Sisi Sisi is what they want in the third world. They want the world to be full of Sisis. I mean, this Sisi now, with a poor country like his country, that he made it even poorer, he bribes the Europeans. Can you imagine? Poor country like him bribes European countries. In his time as president, he visited few European countries as well as America. Every time he visits a country, he buys unnecessary weapons on loans, of course, but the country gets the money for $5 to $6 billion or billion euros. What for? You're not fighting Israel, and Libya is a broken down country. Sudan is, again, very
There's
poor
no
country.
security
You got
threat,
no enemies. You got no enemies. So who's and what is these weapons? Where are they? We don't see it. I mean, the Arab countries have been, including Saudi Arabia, have been buying weapons for billions. So this is how you bribe them. He went to Germany, spent another 5 billion euros. Britain, I don't know, he's Spain, Italy, United States. So he just goes there. Plus, they know out of these 5 billion, see, this is why they want a third world countries to be ruled by dictators. 5 billion euros or dollars, whatever, it is still 5 billion. When you buy from them, you don't know what they're selling you. They're selling you some probably just worth 1 billion. You don't know, because all you have to do is just to bribe an army officer, a minister, a prime minister, and bribe them, and you just give them something inferior. Just give you one example that about 6-7 years ago, during Sisi time, the Russian bought or ordered a submarine from France, right, that cost 800 million euros. 800 million, right? So when it was completed, the Russians found out that it wasn't according to the specifications.
Yes.
So they wouldn't buy it. Who bought it? Sisi, right? He's not paying from his pocket. He will borrow money from the international banks, and the Egyptian people have to pay it, and that's why Egypt became ruined, right? Then he borrowed the money, and he bought so the European countries as leaders, I'm not talking about the people, because people don't know that these things happen. They are happy with the Sisis of the world. They are happy with the Algerian militaries as well. We'll come to talk about them one day. Those people, they just buy without, there's try before you buy. Here, buy and never try. We just buy the weapons and store them. And we don't know whether this works or not. We don't know what they're giving us. Where's the weapons that we'll be buying? Where is it? In the Arab world, the Arab world are the biggest spender of money on weapons throughout the world. And we don't see it. Always defeats after defeats. So weapons is one thing. The second thing is the Arab countries are consumer countries, all of them. None of them looking into manufacturing and to be self-sufficient. What do we consume? European and American products, right? So why should they change them to someone who will make it independent, will make another Japan? We have got the resources to be like Japan or Germany. They're not going to give us the chance. I don't blame them. They're looking after themselves. We have to look after our own.
Right. And, talking about, of course, human resources, Egypt is about 100 million now or so. population, and the poverty now is very, very bad as well.
32% of the population is under poverty line.
Right, okay. And of course, all this kind, as you said, this even when he came to London, Sisi, some people tried to raise an injunction against him, against crime against humanity, human abuse and everything. But even there was this Italian PhD student who went to
Regini,
yes, he went to actual to Egypt, and he disappeared, and he was found with torture marks and all this, and he died as well. I think to that extent you can sell out your principles, in the world. They can, this Western, between inverted commas, they can sell their principles to that extent. Even they can sacrifice their own citizens for sake of their profits. And
well, in the case of Regini, I mean, they didn't sacrifice him, the poor guy, but they had to look, very carefully. It's one citizen for billions of money that's coming from Egypt. That's how they look at it. It's always the interest of the people. That's how they look at it. Okay, I mean, they're not happy about what Sisi did, or what his police force did to Regini, that young university student that they killed, the Egyptian police killed. But I mean, if it was many of them, then they would have taken action. But it is one, and the whole European countries are benefiting from Sisi, and America as well. So they cannot really, so they have sacrificed Regini really. And I mean, you have to remember that the Western world are not idealist. They do believe in democracy. They do believe in human rights for their own people, but not 100%. They are realists. They say, if we lose one or two or a few hundreds for the welfare of the millions, it's worth it. They are realists, really, and they prefer Sisi, but they do tell him off, that make sure that when there are Europeans there, that they are safe. And they are safe. I mean, out of the hundreds or thousands of European journalists in Egypt that cover the events, only one was killed. I mean, if he killed many, I'll tell you, the Europeans would have taken action. Probably, yes, much stronger action. But this matter of principle is a bit flexible. They look at the interest of their country as a whole first.
Now, there was always this problem regarding the religious establishment. Al-Azhar, for example, is a very old religious establishment. And of course, it used to be independent and living from endowments and everything. But now sometimes you find that when they decide about and they sentence some people to very unfair trials, to execution, to death penalties, they get the approval of the Azhar approval from that. Do you think that it is acceptable from the Azhar authority and whoever in charge of it to stay in their hands with the blood of innocent people and what you call just approve what the military regime is dictating on them?
Well, I mean, Al-Azhar, although it's the oldest Muslim institution, it's 1,000 years old. It was built in the year 1000 by the Fatimites. But it hasn't been independent for a long time. It's easy to install a leader of Al-Azhar and few men around him who are pro-government, entice them with privileges, etc. So I don't blame Al-Azhar as an institution. They are just as poor and helpless as the people of Egypt, really. And if there are religious people, few religious people who support dictators in the Arab world, I mean, there are few people who support the dictators everywhere. in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Algeria. But at the same time, look at the prisons, they are full of religious people and scholars. Our prisons are full of good people who are religious and scholars, and they're fighting the system. But the government are not going to appoint these in critical places or important positions. So Al-Azhar now does not reflect, the leaders of Al-Azhar does not reflect the institution of Al-Azhar. And if the people of Al-Azhar, the scholars there, air what they believe it is true, then they know they are sacrificing their lives, the prisons. I mean, the government doesn't mind if they put a few hundreds of them. I mean, who populate the Muslim countries' prisons? The practicing Muslims. All those Muslim scholars, young scholars, and even old scholars who are aware and who are resisting the corruption, they are in prisons. So the religious people really, and the scholars are filling the prisons, and some other scholars filling some government positions. But they are few in number. And let's pray that we are not in their place. It's very testing time. Let's say if you are another leader, a scholar, and then you got to now speak up, and they'll either kill you or end up in prison you and torture, and your family will never see you again. Islamically, it's worth doing it, but if we were in their place, would we do it? So I think.
Right, we have a few minutes left. How do you see the future in Egypt? Do you think that this dictatorship will end, or we'll have another 30 years like Hosni Mubarak's? We have Sisi's lead, and that's it. Well, or we have the opposition, regardless it's religious or not, but it's a civil society who wants to restore democracy and bring democracy as well, and free elections and everything. And do you think, what is the future for Egypt now?
Well, I think, I know the reality doesn't foretell that, but I am very optimistic that the Muslims have decided to change their leaders, to change their way of life. I know the opposition have the upper hand now, but this will not last. It has not happened in the past 100 years that people have one aim together, to change the government, right? So this Arab Spring has started with one target in mind. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. The people want to bring down the system. Okay, they're having the upper hand now, but the whole Arab world now are geared and programmed to change their system. They will change them, and it will happen. It will happen. Just be patient. It will happen. We are not ready yet, but the whole Muslim world now has got one aim, to change. There is no supporters. If the people support any government, they would have fair election. In Mubarak's last election, parliament election, he rigged 500 seats out of 550 in the parliament. 500 seats, he rigged them out of 550. If he was popular, so those leaders are not popular, and they are ruling by force. And the same way that the French had to leave Algeria after 130 years, the Arab leaders will have to leave, even if it took us 130 years. We are having another French Algerian revolution in every Arab country. Okay?
Allah make it easy, inshallah. Jazakallah khair, Abu Bashir. It was nice to talk to you, and your contribution as well, and your thoughts as well, always welcome as well. I hope, inshallah, you enjoyed listening to our program from the Arab Spring, from Dr. Abdul Aziz and Brother Abu Bashir. And inshallah, until we meet again for another country, inshallah, another Arab Spring case, inshallah, we tell you, جزاكم الله خير, we say سبحانك الله وبحمدك نشهد واستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. وجزاكم الله خير، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.